For me, there was a huge difference between the first time I ever did heroin and the first time I ever did good heroin. So that's kind of what I'm going to touch on in this video. But I feel like I'm going to keep going in a chronological order of where I left off in the last video so you guys can kind of understand how Dominic and I ended up where we ended up. Like I mentioned in the last video, after our buddy's house got raided, we started kind of isolating ourselves a lot. Dominic was mostly staying at his grandma's house during that point, and our friend, what did I call him, Tom? I think it was Tom. Tom, like I said in the other video, they were like attached to the hip. So when his house got raided, he got in a lot of trouble, and so he started staying with Dominic at his grandma's house. So for a while, it was just like the three of us all the time, and it was absolutely horrible. Like, those two were just so bad together. Like, oh my god, like the trouble that they caused was fucking ridiculous. I could not take them anywhere, and yet I did all the time. So this is during the second semester of my junior year, and within, I would say like between like February and May of, 2013, I got arrested like 3 or 4 times, every single time with Dominic and Tom. I was still 16 when all of this was going on. My birthday's in June, like the end of June, so I was like the youngest of my grade, so I didn't even turn 18 until after I'd already graduated. So I was still 16 until after my junior year ended. But because of that, I would just get like a phone call home and I would get to leave jail. Like, I never once got a ticket, I never got any type of charge, like I literally just got to go home. Dominic and Tom and whatever other friends were with us were all over 18, and they were never so lucky. I would always end up having to get Dominic out of jail the next day. Like, it was just annoying. But because of all of that, my parents despised Dominic. At one point they told me I couldn't see him. To which, I'm going to tell this story on TikTok actually, so I'm not going to get too into it, but my boyfriend pretty much cut his hair, and he had this like crazy afro. He pretty much cut his hair and showed up at my house one day, told my parents that he had a different name and that he was like a different person, and they believed him. It's a different story for a different day. But there was like a year of our relationship where they thought that he was from a different school and had a different name and like had this whole different backstory, literally all because he cut his hair. Like, that's it. Anyway, I will definitely tell that story at some point. That's a better TikTok story because I can tell that one quickly, and it's got like more impact when it's told quickly. The point of all of that was that my parents did not like Dominic at all. They were like, whoever this boy is that you keep getting arrested with and doing really dumb shit with, like, you're done. We don't want you seeing him anymore. But I never listened to anything that anybody ever told me, so he and I were getting in a lot of trouble. We were doing a lot of drinking, a lot of coke, a lot of Molly. We were doing a lot of Xanax. Like, the drugs kind of just started piling up and up and up. And the environment at his house was very, very different from anything I had known. Like, it was kind of just, we could do what we wanted, and things were very accessible and whatever. I feel like all of this kind of led to the exposure because I actually tried meth and heroin in the same week. And I purely did them because they were just put in front of me. Like, my friends were doing them, they offered me some, and I was like, yeah, sure. The meth actually, so the meth came first, and the meth actually I was told was Molly, and I was crushing it up, and my buddy came over, and he was like, if Dominic just gave you that, that's actually meth. Like, I just got that from Katie, that's mine, I promise it's meth. And I had like the dollar bill rolled up anyway, like the line was ready, and I was like, fuck it. And a couple days later, with that same group of guys, it was Dominic, our friend Jake, who also passed away, and another friend who I will leave nameless, but the same people that I had just done meth with, I did heroin with a couple days later. Now, from the events that happened after this, like, you would assume that the first time I did it was like great, and I was hooked instantly, and that's totally not how it went. I actually fucking hated it. Like, I literally despised it. We did some at my buddy's house, and then we started driving around a little bit, and I remember having to go back to our buddy's house, drop all 3 of the guys off that I was with, because I was like, I feel nauseous, I feel sad, and I wasn't sad because, like, I had just done heroin. Like, I just felt down. Like, and it was not a good down. It wasn't like a Xanax down. Like, I just felt sad, like I wanted to cry. And I also felt like I was about to puke, and I was like, y'all need to get out of the car, like, I need some time to myself. And I actually went to this fucking park, Manchester Park, for anybody who knows it, and I sat on a picnic table and started having, like, a complete emotional breakdown, and I called my mom and told her that I needed her, and I asked her if she would bring me a Subway sandwich to this park, so she did. She didn't know that I was a mess because I had just done heroin. She just thought I was sad and needed a sandwich. I remember being with Dom and Jake later and being like, I don't understand why you guys or anybody else does this drug, because that was only my first time doing heroin. Everybody else there had already done it. I think Dominic was kind of like dabbling with it at this point, but it wasn't anything consistent. But I was just like, why does anybody pay money for this? Like, that is the worst feeling in the world. Like, I don't understand heroin, and I'm good. I never need to do it again. I genuinely don't know the time frame of when I did my first line compared to my first good line. Like, it could have been weeks, it could have been months. I really don't remember. To be honest with you, it was some point in 2013. I would say maybe like May or something. But it all happened at Dominic's house, and one of his friends showed up zooted as fuck. He had just done a bunch of heroin. He was freaking out about something. He had a bunch of heroin left. When he showed up to Dom's house, like, we couldn't fully understand what was going on. And I don't remember all the specific details. Like, I'm sure that we were already high on other drugs. I just remember his friend pretty much, like, begging us to take the rest of his heroin. And whether it was just that he didn't want it anymore or he wanted us to have it, I don't really remember. He just told us to take the heroin, and we fought him for a minute. We were like, you're probably going to want this when you sober up. And he was like, no, like, take the fucking drugs. And I mean, like, okay, you don't got to yell at me. I'll take your drugs. So we break up our lines and we snort them. And pretty much right after we snort them, his friend asked if I was willing to take him somewhere. I think he needed a new phone. I think that's the whole reason for his initial freak out. I really don't remember. But he needed me to take him somewhere. I was the only person with a car. And I agreed. And I remember as I was driving, the dope kicked in. The dope kicked in. I ended up having to drop him off at some random red light. I don't remember where, and I had to pull over and like kind of recollect myself, and maybe even Dominic ended up driving us home. Like, I don't remember. I just remember telling him he had to go and I couldn't drive anymore because I couldn't keep my fucking head up. I could not keep my eyes open. Like, I was so high. And that's the high that got me. That is the high that tied a knot around me and dragged me right. Sorry, my cat just did like some crazy skater flip jump. But that was the high that, like, I feel like I had been searching for ever since I was a teenager. Like, that was the relief that I had looked for all through self-harm, all through drinking, all through all the other drugs I did. Like, when I felt that high, I was like, this is the relief I've been searching for. Little did I know it was all an illusion, and it would actually be like the biggest monster and the biggest obstacle I will ever face in my life. But in that moment, I was convinced that I had found my solution. And the addiction definitely didn't just like take off overnight. It was like a 6-month process, I would say, of like casually doing a couple beans more and more, which was that's all that we did at the beginning of our addiction was beans, which was dope cut with Dorman, which is like sleep medicine, and it's sold in these little beans. And like, I swore for the first few years of my addiction, I was like, dope is not good unless Dorman is in it. But I went from making like 5 of those beans like last me a whole week to 5 of those beans lasting me a whole day, probably within 6 months. I just know by the time my senior year had fully started, like, I was a heroin addict. There are these pictures from the first week of my senior year, and like, obviously the first week is like total chaos. Like, every day was like some theme day. I don't fully remember. I was on a lot of drugs, but my school was very spirited. And I remember I got dragged into these pictures right after I had just gotten super high, like done a bunch of dope, and I look at those pictures and I'm like, God, you can't even tell, but like, little do you know what was going on. And I feel like that's how it was with most of my pictures. Like, I don't have great before and after pictures because, I mean, I have some where I'm completely like blacked out, but for the most part, there aren't like a whole lot of pictures where it's like, wow, you can clearly tell you are an active addiction. Like, I think right up until the end, I hid it pretty damn well. And you know, it's kind of sad. I feel like I remember my freshman to junior year pretty well because maybe there were like more big events that happened, but my senior year, I really couldn't tell you like anything that happened. I have some posts from it, but like, I personally like don't have any big memories of my senior year at all. I do remember at the end of the year on senior skip day, I was not allowed to skip because I wasn't going to graduate until I did like 25 detentions to make up for like the 103 classes that I had missed that semester or whatever. I switched high schools my junior year. I've forgotten to mention that, but my first high school, like the school district that I grew up going to, they didn't give a shit. I never went to school. My freshman and sophomore year, I was never at school. There was never any calls home. There was never any detentions. Like, nobody gave a shit. And then I got to my other school, and they cared a little bit more. So I was the only senior in that building on senior skip day. I sure as shit remember that because I had to sit in detention for like 9 hours. Multiple days, but that was the worst day because I was all alone. But I had great fucking grades, so could they really say shit? No, they could not. Anyway, those are my first experiences that I had with dope. It's, I think, kind of interesting that, like, I genuinely hated the shit out of it the first time I did it, and I just think it wasn't good dope. That's what I chalk it up to because I never really had that issue after that. It was never like, oh, this sucks, you know? So I don't know what happened that first time. Maybe it was a sign to be like, don't do this, you don't like this, and then I didn't listen to it, but I just didn't listen. I had to learn everything in my life the hard way. I still do that to myself. I still do that to myself to this day. We're learning, we're growing, it's fine. And please let me know if you guys have any ideas or topics that you want to hear about for YouTube specifically. I've been having kind of a hard time figuring out what sounds better for a longer video and what you guys are interested in hearing in more depth. So let me know.